What is up, my friends? Pat here, back with another video. It's been a while. I had just gotten back from the craziness that was MoGameCon 2023. Yeah, no plans to talk about that anytime soon. But then I got sick for like 2 weeks. Thankfully, it wasn't COVID, but damn if it didn't feel like it. So since I'm finally feeling better, I thought I'd talk about a topic that I've been wanting to talk about for quite a while now. This one's gonna be fun. I really hope you enjoy it. So let's get started. So if you've been following my channel for any length of time, you probably already know that the last couple of years, I identify more as a reseller than a collector. Now, I'm the type of person that doesn't like to live their life with regrets. I try not to dwell on mistakes of the past because, ultimately, no good can come of it. But as a reseller, you have to be able to make snap decisions. Is this a want or a need? Am I gonna play this? Do I have room for it? And if not, then it goes in the sell pile. And when it's gone, you can't dwell on it. You just let it wash over you and you move on to the next item. But that's not always the case. Any gamer over the age of 30 has a story about the one that got away. And if you're my age, you probably got like 20.
Oh, I'm like the Crypt Keeper!
Now, a couple of weeks ago at MoGameCon, I heard so many stories with people coming up to me and they would see something on my table and they would be like, man, I used to have that. I wish I wouldn't have sold it. And I myself told multiple stories, which brings us to the topic of today's video. So I thought it might be kind of fun to list the top 5 things that I regret getting rid of over the years. Everybody's got a story. You're not alone. So I just thought I'd tell mine. Now, before we get started, I did want to point out that these items did not make this list because of monetary value. They may be of value, but that's not the reason that they made the list. All right, coming in at number 5 is my childhood Atari 2600. This first one doesn't really fall into the category of something I sold. This is something that I passed on. So let me give you a little backstory. Back in the early 2000s, we had just moved into the house that we are currently in. My daughters were both very young at that time, and I remember it very vividly. My mom called me out of the blue, and she said that she was rummaging through things, and she was just getting into that kind of spring cleaning mode, and she said, I found our old Atari 2600, and there was like 50 games or more, a whole bunch of controllers, and she said, do you want it? Now, you have to understand that back then, Atari 2600s, they just weren't worth anything. And I was in a mode where gaming just wasn't really something I was into at that time. I was always a gamer. I was just kind of in like a down period. I was more into like home theater and movies and just, again, my kids were young. I was focusing on this house and getting it into the condition that I wanted it to be in, things that are more important than gaming at that time. So I just said, nope, I have no use for it.
What an idiot.
I remember telling her to take it to this local mom and pop chain that I think is still around in my area called Slacker CDs and Games, where you could trade things in. They actually turned her away. They didn't even want it. They weren't going to give her even $5, $10. So she ended up taking our childhood Atari 2600 to Goodwill. It was a heavy sixer, if you know what that is. That was the one with the 6 switches. It was heavier. It's a sought after model. And more than anything, it was my 2600, and I don't want to buy another one. I've not bought one all these years because it just wouldn't be the same. It's not mine. I always wonder, where did it end up? Who got it? Is it still working? But yeah, if I could go back in time, I would have answered that phone call a little bit differently. And number 4 is a TurboGrafx 16. So back when I started this channel 4 years or so ago, there was a store that I was visiting and I would buy a lot of cool stuff from. It was actually called the Really Cool Stuff Store. Shocker that it's not still open with that great name. But he did have a lot of cool stuff in there. The owner's name was Rick. We got to become friends. He would let me come in there and just look around before hours, after hours. And he had a lot of boxes in there that he never went through. There was just all this random stuff, cords and cables. There was video game systems. I remember finding like 5 or 6 GameCubes at one point, which again, I turned them all down. I just thought maybe they didn't work. But I ended up finding 4 TurboGrafx 16s, and I showed them off in a video a while back when my channel was just starting, and there was a convention coming up, and all I kept thinking about was just dollar signs, like I'm just gonna sell these. I remember he sold them to me for 10 bucks a piece, but there was hardly any cables. I think I found one AV cable, I found another one that had been ripped. I didn't find any controllers or any power supplies, which they were probably there somewhere in that store. It was such a mess. And I had no problem selling them, obviously. I only sold them for like 50 or 60 a piece, but why I didn't keep one of those, I have no idea.
Did you eat a lot of paint chips when you were a kid? Why?
Selling one paid for all of them. And I think my thought process was, well, if I got to buy a controller and an AV cord and a power supply, then at that point, I might as well just buy one that's got everything on eBay, because I'm probably gonna just spend more adding all that stuff. Plus I didn't have any games, which, you know, looking back, I could have just bought some kind of a flash card or an EverDrive. I mean, at $10 a piece, I really wish that I could have had one of those for myself, but you know, woulda, coulda, shoulda. Now the third item also came from the Really Cool Stuff store, and that is something I also showed off on the channel a couple times, I believe, and that is a complete in box Donkey Kong Country Super Nintendo set, and it was in mint condition. It had every baggie, all the booklets and the paperwork. The thing had never been played. Rick, the owner, told me that the guy that gave it to him, he doesn't think he ever played it, and then Rick just put it on a shelf. Now I ended up selling it on eBay for quite a bit of profit, and I think that's what I was just thinking, was just dollar signs. Like I only paid 70 bucks for this thing, $70, like 4 years ago. At that price, it was still a good deal back then. I should have just kept it. And I remember me and my wife going to the National Video Game Museum, and I saw this same set behind glass, and I just was like, it was like an anvil hit me on the head. Duh, why did you do that?
You're not too bright, are you?
It was such a pristine example of a Super Nintendo, and I mean, I'm using a Junior right now, but I would have loved to have just taken that back and not sold that on eBay for whatever this person paid for it. Even though, again, it was a pretty good profit, I wish I could have it back. So the number 2 item is pretty interesting, and I'm hoping that somebody else can remember what I'm talking about. So bear with me here. Back in the early 90s, video game magazines were all the rage, and I probably subscribed to at least 6, if not more. So there was Game Informer, Die Hard Game Fan, Sega Visions, Next Generation, Nintendo Power, Game Pro. And in those magazines, in the very back, there would always be these little ads, and you could order imports. There was like Funko Land ads where you could actually trade your games in, or you could buy used games back before, you know, that was a thing. And I remember one ad in particular. Now, I couldn't find that exact ad, but from memory, I'm pretty sure it said something to the effect of, join the Mortal Kombat Underground. Send a self-addressed stamped envelope to this address, and that was it. You know, it was real vague. So I put my name and address on an envelope. That's something that you did back then in the 80s. A lot of people remember that. You would just send an envelope with your name and address on, you slap a stamp on, and I mailed it off. And I forgot about it. So a couple months later, before the release of Mortal Kombat 1 on the home consoles, I get this letter. It's kind of like thicker cardstock, and it's got my address on it with a little sticky label, and then it was held together with a piece of tape. And I opened it up carefully, and it was called The Pit, Mortal Kombat Underground Newsletter, Volume 1, Issue 1. And I just remember getting like goosebumps, like, oh my God, I'm part of this Mortal Kombat Underground. Like, how special am I?
Well, isn't that special?
How many people have this thing other than me? You know, how many people saw that little tiny ad? It wasn't anything special that was in there. a lot of the magazines covered what was already there, but it was like the mythology of Mortal Kombat, the whole story, and they would have character bios, there'd be some special moves, fatalities, things like that. And it was basically 4 pages, the front, and then the inside of that one, and then the other sheet, and then the back of that. So it was really just 4 pages, but it was really cool. So I remember folding it back up, and like 6-8 months later, right before the release of Mortal Kombat 2, I get another one in the mail. And this one's in color. And it was called The Pit 2, Mortal Kombat Underground Volume 1, Issue 2. And I was just like, holy shit, I got 2 of these now. This one was a lot more detailed. It just, with the colors, it was a lot brighter. And I just cherished these things. And here's the crazy part. When NBA Jam came out on the home consoles, then I got one for that as well, because Acclaim, released all 3 of those games. So what I would do is I would store these in totes with all my gaming magazines, and then I would pull out the tote every now and then underneath of my bed, and I would pull out these magazines and I would just read them cover to cover. I'm sure a lot of other people did that as well. And I remember every time I'd see those newsletters sitting on top. And at about that time, right around when my mom had called as well, I was just like, I'm not really gaming that much. I have these newsletters, they're probably worth something. So I put them on eBay for like $15. And I just put rare Mortal Kombat Underground newsletter. I think I put free shipping because obviously it didn't weigh very much. And I remember hitting, click it to start the auction. And then I got a buy it now within seconds of getting off the bed. And I heard that cha-ching, like literally like 15 seconds later. And I was like, oh shit, what have I done? I probably let these things go way too cheap. And immediately I got like remorse, like why did I do that?
You're so stupid.
This falls in this category of something that I've never seen before and never seen again. And I've seen scans of them. I think there's currently one on eBay for $350, I think. I don't really want it for the monetary value. I want it because it was something that I was really proud of, because again, these are pieces of paper. How many of these survived? I'm thinking not very many. If there was even 100 still around, I would be shocked. And these are things, because they were thicker, I could have framed them. These were something very special, and I was dumb enough to let them go. All right, so before we get to number 1, I did want to bring up 2 honorable mentions. It wouldn't be a top 5 list without some honorable mentions. So one of the items was a Super Mario Brothers door hanger that I think was like a Scholastic mail-off that you would get with books back in the day. I got that off of Facebook. I think I showed that off in a video. It was really cool. I actually had it on this door for a while, but I kept just thinking it's going to break because it's made of thin plastic. But it was just really unique. And again, it was from like 1986 or 87. And again, I've never seen another one like it. The next item that I probably shouldn't have got rid of was a Game Boy Light. Now these were Japanese only. I did a video on it. These were basically Game Boy Pockets, but they were backlit with this bioluminescent blue light, kind of like a Timex watch. Really cool. I've never seen another one. Again, a lot of the stuff that I'm mentioning are things that I have never seen before or since, and I've kind of adopted a rule to never let that happen again if it's something like that. But anyway, those are 2 things that I would also like to have back. All right, so coming in at number 1, I've talked about this before. I've mentioned it to people, and I'm sure a lot of people thought I was crazy when I said I was going to sell it. And that is the Nintendo cart that I found on LetGo. Now, this is back when, again, my channel was very new. I was using LetGo a lot and finding some amazing stuff. I found the Game Boy Light on there, a lot of other interesting things that I've had over the years. But this one in particular was pretty special because it was a one owner. And if you're familiar with those Nintendo carts, I think they were sold at like Montgomery Ward or out of a catalog. I can't remember actually. And it was in perfect condition. What really makes that one sting is the reason I wanted to sell it. I was just getting into arcade one-ups at that time, and where that cart would have went my thought process was, well, I'm going to put an arcade one up there, which, yeah, we all know how that turned out. I don't get into arcade one-ups anymore, and the fact that I put that an arcade one-up over this cart, it was not a smart move.
I mean, I'm so dumb.
Right now, I've got a 20-inch Sony CRT on this old retro-looking microwave cart, and it works fine, and it's got great storage, and the top swivels, but it's nowhere near as cool as the Nintendo cart would have been. And I don't know if I was high that day. I don't know what I was thinking. I was obviously thinking dollar signs, and a guy actually bought it from me. He drove all the way from like Indiana just for this Nintendo cart. And I remember as he drove away just thinking, what did I just do? Was that a smart move? I think I'm gonna regret that one. And yeah, it was dumb. Very dumb. So dumb.
You are so dumb. You are really dumb. For real.
All right, guys, that is my list. If you made it this far, thank you so much. It's kind of painful to talk about this stuff, but it's also kind of cathartic. You know, getting this stuff off your chest, it kind of makes you feel a little bit better. And just knowing that I'm not the only one. Everybody's got a story like this. So that's what I want to know from you. Is there something recently or when you were younger that you got rid of that you really regret? Let me know in the comments. And as always, if you enjoyed the video or you learned something, make sure to hit that thumbs up and consider subscribing. It really helps out. All right, guys, thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.